In this video, let's discuss applying and the resume. I'll give you a few tips to make the application process run smoother both now and in the future. And then I'll go over some resume tips that I have along with 2 resume reviews of resumes that I personally reviewed. One is before I reviewed it and one is after I reviewed it, though they are of different people and redact. Let's start with tips for applying. One thing that I often note is that candidates feel like they are underqualified. So my first tip is to always apply to a role you're interested in. People joke that you miss whatever percent of the shots you don't take. Think about it. How can a company say no to you if you never even apply to them? People think that, oh, I'll never be able to work at a FANG or Big Four or XYZ company or finance company because I have different qualifications or backgrounds. But you're not sure what they're looking for. They might not tell you what team they need, or maybe you'll be able to convince them that you're a good candidate for some position that they didn't even know they need. So always put yourself into consideration and put yourself first by applying to any company regardless of what experience they require. The second tip I have is to maintain a log of the companies you've applied to, when you applied, when they responded, and what your process is. Doing so will help you keep track of the companies that you're most interested in. It will help you keep track of recruiter emails and who was responsive, who wasn't, and next year or whenever you decide to change jobs, you'll be able to cross-reference this sheet and find previous contacts or where you were almost getting an offer or close, and those places might be the most open to having you back. This will help you also create a network, and it will help you build relationships with people such as recruiters or even engineers that interview you. And it's important that you write these things down because no one can memorize all of this. The final tip I have is to be persistent. People often tell me that they've applied to 10, 15 companies and they haven't heard back. My sophomore year, I applied to 200 companies and I heard back from maybe 15, let alone got an offer at any of them. My junior year, after I had a couple of experiences under my belt, I applied only to 50 companies and I got back 20 to 30 responses at least, and I got offers at almost all of the ones that I continued in the interview process with. Now, this is obviously a result of previous experience and tons of studying on my end, but you can do this too. Your job is to be persistent and keep trying. 10 might not be enough, 50 applications might not be enough, heck, 200 applications might not be enough for some people if you're targeting at the wrong time or if your resume hasn't been reviewed enough, but it's never going to hurt you to keep on trying. So I advise you to be persistent and always put your neck out there to see if whatever opportunities are out. Now let's talk about some resume general tips. The first tip I have for your resume is to use a template. We all have tons of other things to do. Creating a resume template, unless it's a side project or something you're really interested in, should be the last thing you're concerned with. Use a template that other people have used, and this will save you a ton of time. It will have pre-configured information and fields for you, and you just have to type in your own information. The second tip I have is that simplicity is key. A resume with flashy colors and pictures and borders or whatever other thing you decide to put on there is merely confusing. Recruiters aren't super interested in seeing skill bars of how good you are at certain languages because it's all relative and they don't know how to judge that. Instead, talk about concrete, objective things that have happened or that you've done at your previous work experiences or projects. This is what will sell you and your experience to a recruiter or an engineer who's looking at your resume. And this is how you will get that first foot in the door. My last tip is to get your resume reviewed and then get it reviewed 5 more times after that. One set of eyes is often enough to get 80% of the mistakes on your resume. That last 20% might not be objective, it might be subjective. So it might be things like style for writing or the way you organize your resume or even the format or template. And the best way you'll get data points on this is by having multiple people you trust review your resume. So review your resume often. Having said all of this, this is very abstract help, and this doesn't help a lot of people out there who need more specific resume help. I could obviously go through and tell you what I put in my resumes, but that won't help you understand how someone reviews a resume. So to give you the most insight in how resume reviews might work, let's go through 2 of our own. Let's first start with a resume that is less strong. Here is someone's resume that I reviewed a few months back. Immediately, the first thing I noticed is that there are colors on this resume. These colors aren't super annoying or flashy, but it doesn't add anything to the experience. So I question why they add these colors. Why is there orange and blue? That's the initial impression. So I'll see their name and information at the top, which has been redacted. And then the first section is experience. So this is a good thing. I like to see that people have good experience, so I would mark this as something good. However, I know that this person is in college, so I'm curious why their school experience isn't up here towards the top. However, let's read on. So I'm not going to read all of the bullet points because as a recruiter or manager, I only have so much time to look at each resume. I'm looking at the first few words: worked with, created and enhanced, and then I see technologies used. Now, one thing I don't like about this kind of format is technologies used. You might use 1,000 different technologies, but it doesn't tell me if you're proficient with them or how you worked with them. It doesn't tell me if you're just putting them there because they were part of the systems you were working with or if those were the main ones you were using. So let the technologies that you used become evident in the way that you talk about the work that you did. It should be extremely obvious that you used Python if you mention Python libraries, and sometimes I don't even care if you used Python. Obviously, some companies might, but you might have done some really awesome work, and the fact that you did it is good enough for me. Moving on, let's look at the next work experience. See animated flight trajectories, built tools to parse data, created programmatic processes, used SVN and Git. That last one I don't like, but the first three sound really interesting. So what this person did well is they used good verbs. Animated and built and created, even though they repeated created, are good words to use. And these descriptive words help someone who's skimming your resume get a quick idea of the kinds of things that you've done in previous experiences. Moving down, I see projects. It's immediately a plus that this person has done projects. Many people haven't. So we see that the first one is a data visualization challenge, and I like that because it shows initiative. This person likes to work with data. This doesn't seem like a strong suit of theirs, right? I'm not sure what they studied because their school wasn't towards the top, but data visualization is pretty interesting. So I'm glad that they did something outside of their comfort zone, or what's likely outside of their comfort zone. I'm not going to read the bullet points because I don't have too much time, right? And so the next one is undergraduate research assistant. Again, this is a plus. Research is hard. I think research is challenging. You have to be good at reviewing literature. You have to understand complicated concepts. Often this involves a lot of math. Of course, I'm not sure how in-depth this research was. Many students are research assistants and all they do is fill in Excel sheets, but I'll now skim the bullet points since I'm curious and I see wrote and modified Python scripts, develop methods to correct data. So this is interesting. This person has done side projects with data that might not necessarily pertain to their previous work experience. So this person has a diverse skill set. And finally, we look at the last undergraduate research assistant. It doesn't seem super interesting to me. The first bullet starts with worked entirely in a Unix environment. As a manager or engineer, I might expect this from most of my engineers, or expect some comfort or familiarity, especially after a computer science degree, which I'm not sure this person is getting. And so this is uninteresting. Finally, I see the education, and so this should be at the top. This education section is crucial for people who are in college or recent grads because education is a lot of the credentials you have. You might not have a lot of work experience or any, and so an employer only has your education and GPA and classes taken to go off of. I do like that they included extracurricular activities here. That's a plus because it shows that they're diverse people. They might be a good culture fit. And the GPA is also good. Any GPA above a 3.0, I advise that you put on your resume. If it's not a 3.0, look at your major GPA. If your major GPA is above a 3.0, put that on. And if neither are above 3.0, don't put your GPA on your resume. It's absolutely not a deal breaker and you'll be completely fine if you don't have your GPA on your resume. At the end, I see additional skills. This doesn't seem too different from me from the list of skills this person put in the work experience. This also doesn't tell me familiarity or how skilled they are with each skill, so I think that they should remove or change this section. And finally, I see interests at the end. I see artificial intelligence, machine learning, cool, and it gets to music production, guitar, piano, tennis. This is super common from resumes in the past that have objectives and that show interests. And this isn't contemporary, especially in the software engineering world. It's very uncommon to find this on resumes because there are usually projects and other skills to talk about. And so I would recommend against putting something like interests or objectives on your resume. Overall, this person's resume was decent. I might interview them. They did some interesting work, but the format was hard to read. I spent a few minutes reading that and I still don't know much about this person or their skills, though I do know that they go outside of their comfort zone. So this resume is okay. Let's look at a better one. This person's resume uses a 2-column format, and I am biased. I enjoyed this format, and this was also after I reviewed the resume and recommended it. So this is the template I recommended. If you're interested, this resume is called the DD template, which is spelled like this. If you look this up, you'll find it on GitHub. However, be warned, it is in LaTeX, which means that you'll have to essentially code your resume up. It's not challenging, but I do recommend checking it out if you're interested in this. So I see their information at the top. That's good. It's important to have an email and probably a phone number, maybe a website. You don't need to put your address up there. I see education, it looks good. I can see their major exactly from the get-go. I don't even remember reading the other person's major, though I know it was there. Their GPA is solid, and I see a concentration. I don't care so much for this, it's not so important, but departmental honors is impressive. Honors is already impressive if you're in university honors or some other honors college, but departmental honors is when you do a research project in the department, and that's definitely a plus to include on your resume. Next thing I see is coursework. This is perfect. I like seeing all of this coursework in case I want to reference it. It helps also match buzzwords. Many companies use HR resume screening softwares that will just match buzzwords in their job description to the words in your resume. Often, these will be class names, and so including your coursework like this is useful. I used to not include it, and I thought it was useless, but I realized that once I started including it, I got tons of more responses from companies, and so ever since, I recommend it to anyone who is in college or a recent grad. Now, let's look at the experience. So, I can immediately see that this person uses great vocabulary. They built a pipeline, performed analysis, and modeled the immigration process. And those are interesting to me. I am especially interested in building pipelines and modeling a process because that demonstrates both data analysis and data visualization-ish skills, as well as CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment skills, which are very common and sought after in DevOps roles. So already I'm getting an interest in this candidate. If this seems relevant to me, I might read the whole description. However, let's say it's not, so we go further down. And I see that this person provided 3D printing and maintained and developed a website. Those are okay. Provided 3D printing sounds pretty interesting, but it doesn't draw out to me for whatever role I'm looking for. Finally, we'll look at their last role, and it's research and created data visualizations. Fascinating. Determine parameters that maximize production output. Interesting. And then integrated data pre-processing. So this person has a lot of familiarity with pipeline work, whether it be deployment or data. So let's read more into this one. Let's look at the second bullet. Determine parameters that maximize production output for the facility using a variational autoencoder. Perhaps I know what that is. I personally don't, but if I did, that would tell me the technologies they use. And that was trained to reduce a 16,538 dimensional vector to 2 dimensions. What did we just learn? I personally don't know what that means. What I know what that means as a manager or recruiter is this person took a big number and turned it into a small number. What does that tell us? Numbers are crucial. If you can quantify the results that you've had at a company, what your impact is, that will tell someone who's looking at your resume infinite amounts more than saying a bunch of words around it will. Those numbers are the raw data that demonstrate your value and importance to the companies or previous experiences you've had, and that's what will probably convince managers or recruiters to give you an interview at, especially at some of those better companies. So we'll keep going down. The award section is nice. I don't think that it's required, but if you have awards, it's nice to put them on your resume. Now let's look at the skills section. I see that this person has separated languages, frameworks, tools. Now, I don't understand really if they're good at all of these or if there's just a few of these that they're skilled at. What I do know is that this inclusion is nice to look at, so it's eye candy. It looks like the ordering is somewhat relevant, so this person is probably most skilled at Java and C out of their languages. And finally, it will match buzzwords for HR software. This is an advantage that the other person also had, but in this case, it doesn't detract from the resume. Let's look at research. They experimented with various models and presented results. So clearly this person is motivated. They do work outside of their classwork at school, and I'm curious to learn about their research, even though I don't know what it means and I don't really know if I have enough context or insight to understand it. Notice that, especially for those of you who have graduated more than a year or two ago, these research sections are probably not important. They're not going to make or break your resume at all, and it's only relevant for those who don't have as much work experience in the past, or those who are research focused. And finally, we'll look at the project section. Now, I see that this person developed a program to find an exchange rate, so that's in some initiative. They programmed a deep learning network. That's new, right? So that's ML and AI that previously I didn't know this person did. So this is the breadth of their skill set. They created a dynamic website, not super interesting. It's not super unique at least. Finally, wrote a compiler for C. Now, as a recruiter, I'll recognize that almost everyone puts that on their resume. A compiler in C is a very common project at many universities, so I'm not going to bat an eyelash. If this was a compiler for some obscure language or was clearly unique, I might be more interested. And that wraps up the resume reviews. So the reason I wanted to do this and didn't go over every single word is I wanted to simulate how a real life person will look at your resume. They'll look at the first few words of every bullet point, they'll skim it much faster than I did, and they'll make their judgment call. Do I want to read this beyond the 10 to 15 seconds I spent looking at it? Is it visually pleasing enough without detracting from the experience of reading the content on the resume? And does this person seem like they know what they're doing? Is the resume as composed as I expect the person to be? Remember, this is the first impression you're having on almost everyone at the companies you're applying to. Again, reference those tips in the beginning about applying and the resume, and in no time, you'll have your foot in the door.